There's so much you can do with search that you cannot do on Meta, the #1 Google advertising agency. My business partner,
if you keep feeding it loads of rubbish, it's going to keep giving that back to you.
don't just stab in the dark. They're generating 10 to 20K. You're barely scaling, that's doing nothing. Something's wrong.
PMax is generating me such a high return on ad spend, it doesn't really make any sense to me.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, you're going to really struggle. Go back to the basics, yeah? Best place to actually start.
Joe Morrobel, my business partner and co-founder of Profit Driven Marketing, the #1 Google advertising agency. Well, we like to think so anyway.
Yeah.
How are you, brother?
All good, brother, all good.
Good. Well, thank you for joining me today, your second time on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck in. I think something we realized recently is, having been scaling e-commerce businesses since 2021, we've not been the best at being vocal about what we're doing or really sharing kind of the insides on the nuts and bolts of our strategies and how we're actually scaling e-commerce businesses. I think we've been guilty of kind of only keeping that confined between us and the marketing meetings that we have with our clients. But by this point, you know, together having worked at Profit Driven Marketing for 3 years now, and prior to that you were at another global marketing agency called SV, and even then you've dabbled in Google Ads prior to that as well. So by this point you've probably got like 10 years marketing experience in the paid advertising world and building funnels and that kind of stuff. For me, more like 4, but together there's certainly a wealth of knowledge there, and I think it'd be really, really useful for anyone watching if we were to really talk about how we actually scale e-commerce businesses right now using Google Ads in sync with other paid advertising channels as well. I think we both know that when it comes to scaling an e-commerce store, the product is obviously very, very important. Like, without a good product, you're only really going to get so far, if far at all, before you start getting issues and holes in your foundation. But after, you know, sourcing a good product or scaling a good product or a good brand, the next thing really probably is marketing, you know, because by investing your time and your money into marketing, that's really where you're going to get the greatest ROI, you know, putting cash in to get cash out. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. When we look at e-commerce businesses, because a lot of people will often apply to work with us, in your opinion, how do we best identify the businesses that are actually going to go somewhere? Because there are a lot of people entering the world of e-commerce now, and it's never been easier to start a business, but only very few actually get the opportunity to actually scale.
Yep.
So what are the sort of things that we look for when, or how would you identify a winning e-com brand? What needs to be in place before you sort of start running paid ads?
I guess it depends where they are in the journey. Because really, I think where you should always start is knowing where your competitors are, right? If you're in a particular niche, you need to know who your biggest competitors are and who you're closest to, because especially on Google, those are the people you're immediately going up against, right? So understanding what your competition are doing. And when we go ahead and review a business, I think that's one of the best places to start first, is understanding who their competitors are and then understanding how much demand there is available within that niche. It solely does depend on how the brand is built. If you have limited products, then you're probably focusing on a more narrow niche. If you have quite a lot, then it's more of a broad niche, right? So I'm going to let's just take the niche of home and garden as an example, okay? Big niche, and luckily, and we do have a client actually recently onboarded, but you have 2 things to look at there. First, you need to look at, as a whole, home and garden, okay? Especially if they're a retailer, the home and garden niche as a whole. So you can use something like Google Trends or Keyword Planner and just see how that niche kind of operates over time. And what we know is there's kind of 2 seasons to it, right? The garden season, which is going to be the summertime, especially if you're shipping in the UK. And then the interior side, which is going to be, you know, throughout the other periods of the year. So first, analyzing how that niche performs over time, so you know what types of products to be focusing on. And second, if it's a retailer, then you can obviously see how much volume there is for a brand. So, and I've kind of explained that in a very long-winded way, but essentially there's a few different elements. It's how a niche performs, who your competitors are, and if you're selling for other brands, seeing how much volume those brands have, and if you're not, just a product type as a whole. So I guess when you're starting any brand, it's knowing your competition, because to be honest with you, it's very rare you're going to be in a niche where there's no one else in there at the moment. So understanding who they are, reverse engineering that first, doing some research. We've got the whole Google network to be able to research. All of the data is already there. Get up Keyword Planner, have a little look. Get up Google Trends, have a little look. See who is dominating in that market, see how much volume there is available. And then that would be the first place to focus to start to capitalize. So I'd probably start there. And then depending if they have advertising or have done advertising in the past, then obviously analyzing that to see where the low-hanging fruit is. I think, unfortunately, a lot of, especially if you're working with an agency, a lot of agencies kind of start at one place and they just continue this path where they initially started, rather than really kind of having like an outside perspective. You get to a certain point sometimes when you're growing a brand where you really do need to zoom out and look, okay, we've managed to get it from here to here. What did that? Okay, we followed this path from the competition, and then it's analysing, okay, maybe we're now in a market in which we can start to find other kind of sub-niches that we can focus in. So and that was a very long-winded way of answering your question, but maybe a slightly different approach to we typically talk about, because I think the competition is probably the best place to actually start.
Competition, basically just leveraging the existing data that you have available at your disposal. When it comes to paid ads, and especially if it is a newer advertising account, at the start, you can obviously set up campaigns that we know are ultimately going to work, especially for ecom such as shopping, search, and get things going on other networks as well. But at the very start, you're pretty much just paying to acquire data. And then once you have that data, you can begin to optimize it. So if we can leverage things like Google Trends, Google Keyword Planner, which are all free tools, by the way, to actually get insights as to what the market is doing or what people are actually actively searching for on Google, then we can have a better starting point rather than starting from zero. So I think you make a good point there. Have a look or leverage the data that you have at your disposal, which is accessible freely, and then also have a look at what your competitors are doing as well. You can even go on to what's the Google library that's similar to Meta Ad Library?
Ad Transparency.
Ad Transparency, to see what your competitors are doing, what campaigns they've got live, or even previous campaigns they had live during certain periods. So again, if you're looking to get set up in, say, Q4, you can go back to Q4 of last year and see what some of your closest competitors were doing. So I think that's always a good place to start, like you mentioned. What are your competitors are doing? What existing data do you have available? So let's assume then that you've done that. You've got your brand. You're at the point now where you're getting some proof of concept, like you're getting a few organic sales, and you think, right, now I'm ready. I really want to push ads. What are certain things that we would look out for, or maybe advise that a particular business look to have in place before they start spending money on paid ads?
Okay, so no ad running at the moment, or nothing?
No.
I think it then is the economics of the brand. Excuse me. So the economics of the brand, knowing the targets that you're going for, right? Without any targets in place, or without understanding what your break even is or where your margins are at, you're going to really struggle to validate something, because you don't know when something's working or when it isn't. You might be generating sales, but they're super unprofitable, and you might never be able to get to a profitable point because your competition dominates too much. So it's like knowing your numbers, starting there, I guess. Ensuring that your website's strong. So try to get a relatively decent conversion rate. If you're on Shopify, between 1% to 2%, I would say, as a base. It really does revolve around initially the competition, but let's just say you've validated your product, you're generating a couple sales organically. I then would probably jump into Google immediately, just because if you're generating organic sales through Google or through a search network, then that's kind of validated that Google ads is going to work. If you're seeing that you're getting traction across Meta or Reels or that type of thing, then maybe a slightly more top of funnel approach would work. So maybe just boosting some posts on Meta or on TikTok. But let's just say they're generating organic sales on Google. I would then review Search Console to see, or Google Analytics, to see what keywords are actually working. Make sure that they're put within the titles of your within your product titles. Pull that to a Google ad account, run the shopping feed. Shopping is going to be the best place just because it has the lowest CPCs, and then run that for, let's just say, 3 to 4 weeks just to see what you get back. Try your best not to touch it. Review the search terms that you're generating. Are you generating similar search terms to what have previously converted organically? If not, begin to exclude those and just try to filter your campaigns to focus on what has actually worked. So to kind of answer your question quite directly, if it's working organically on search engines, then I would do Google Shopping and Google Search, but Shopping because it's cheaper. And then if you're seeing more success on social networks, then I would try to potentially boost those posts that have worked or have the most traction, or just set up some ad campaigns that are a little bit more tailored towards your product. So that's probably what I'd say initially.
So make sure you have your Google Analytics tags set up.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got your Facebook pixel on if you are at ground zero. So you're actually at least acquiring some data. Even if you're not looking to run ads yet, get your analytics tags set up. So then you can actually start tracking organic traffic through Google Analytics and utilize tools like Google Search Console to actually see what keywords you're showing for, and even better than that, what keywords you're converting for, if any, based on the data that is available. And then, like you said, rightly so, you've then got the opportunity to leverage the data again. So I think what we're noticing a common theme here, it's like capture as much data as possible and leverage as much data as possible. Don't just stab in the dark. So set up your analytics tags, even if you're not leveraging paid ads. Have a look on Search Console, find out what search terms are converting, and then likely so, you said, if you are to then set up your product feed, or if you've already set up your product feed and you're using Google Merchant Center free product listing ads, which is also a good starting point to just get your ads on the shopping network as product listing ads. You can also get some data back from that. Then you can use a combination of Google Search Console and also Google Merchant Center, or the data available within Google Merchant Center, to optimize your product listing ads. So taking the search terms from Google Search Console that have proven to convert and start applying those to your product titles in Google Merchant Center. So there are still ways you can gain visibility on the Google network without actually putting any paid advertising spend down. Obviously, you won't get any data within the actual advertising account, but organically you can. So you mentioned about knowing your numbers, also extremely important, like actually understanding what your cost of goods sold are. And we often provide all of our clients with a free spreadsheet that they can use just to actually track that, so they can calculate what their cost price is, what their sale price is, obviously take off any of the additional COGS, maybe like the merchant center fees, merchant fees, as in like the Shopify transactions or Stripe transaction fees, all of that kind of stuff, any taxes that are due, and ultimately what you're left with regards to not only a monetary value, but a percentage. So you can see what percentage or what profit margin you're operating on at a profit per sale. In addition to that, sometimes we'll recommend like third-party apps, right, where you can use, what's the app we're using at the moment?
Conjura.
Yeah, we recently switched, right? So Conjura, again, to track profit per sale or actually understand your COGS. So we've said a few things now then. Competitor research, really, really important. Leveraging any existing data that is available on Google Trends and things like that, Google Keyword Planner, setting up your tracking tags to actually start acquiring data that's relevant to your website organically, understanding your COGS and understanding your profit margins. 49% of people use Google to research and buy products. If your e-commerce business isn't using Google Ads in 2024, then you're missing out on a profitable sales channel. And for those of you that are running Google Ads, I guarantee that 99% of you could be generating a greater return on investment. At Profit Driven Marketing, we help e-commerce businesses just like yours scale with Google Ads, increasing revenue and maximizing ROI. Just like we did for our clients, where we achieved results like this, and this, and this within the last 12 months alone. If you want to see how you can scale your e-commerce business, we'll show you your full potential with a free audit and step-by-step 90-day scaling roadmap. See the video description now to learn more. All right, now back to the podcast. So let's say that someone's done all of that. Like you said, maybe they've got some posts on socials that are doing well and they've decided to use post IDs and put a bit of budget behind those, push organic posts that are working well, give them a bit more oomph. And they're at the point now where they're thinking, okay, so I'm generating maybe 10K, 20K in sales per month. Or maybe it's not as consistent as that, but they've got some proof of concept there. And they say, okay, I really want to start running ads and start pushing this. What would we then look for? Like if someone came to us and said, I'm at 10 to 20K a month, I want you to start running my ads, what is the first thing that we would do?
Have they been running ads to get to this point, or is this organic?
Let's go through both scenarios. So let's first assume that they haven't run any ads yet. Maybe they've done some meta or something outside of that. Cumulatively across sales channels, they're generating 10 to 20K, but they've not yet utilized any Google ads. We'll do that. And then also, what if they are currently generating money from paid ads? Again, all sales channels with a bit of Google ads. So let's go through, if they've never run Google ads before, what would we best suggest as a starting point?
Well, I'd be very happy because they validated a product with no paid ads, which to me is...
or just no Google, but maybe other channels, potentially, like across all sales channels, they've got some sales.
Okay, all right. So I'm not as happy now. But I would say, again, similar to the first point, is analyze the data they already have available. Let's just say they're working on Meta and they've managed to get some of their posts running to generate 10 to 20k in sales. I then would understand, okay, if we want to take that over to Google, is it a product that's relevant for Google? Yeah, because there's certain types of products that are and there aren't. If it's a super, super niche product, there might not be enough demand, or if people aren't problem aware. So if it's a problem solving product, but people aren't really problem aware, that might be the reason why Meta is working very well. But what I'll try to take is the existing data. So if they're generating traffic through alternate channels, let's just say higher up in the funnel, people are, depending how much they're going to spend, are likely going ahead and then searching for things relevant to that brand or that product. So first it would be, okay, within Search Console, Google Analytics, are people looking for the brand name? If so, then it might make sense to start to try to capitalize on that on Google, increase the budget a little bit more elsewhere, higher up in the funnel, and then slowly but surely you're going to start to find other things that people look for relevant to the brand. So I'd start there. Then if there's other things people are looking for within Search Console that are semi-relevant, so product type or variants of that, then grab some of those and then plug them into Google and run it. So realistically, similar to the first, I would go ahead and bring the shopping feed if they haven't got anything set up, set some search text campaigns up, low budget, leave it as they've got going on within the other platforms, and then just see what that does to the overall back-end sales. Something very, very important that agencies don't take into account is ultimately all the brand cares about is the back end. Yeah, like we're going to optimize everything we can on the front end, but without looking at the back end, we might see that more sales are being attributed to Google. So let's say they've got Meta in place, we've now got Google. They might be generating the same sales on the back end, and now they just have sales attributed to Meta and sales attributed to Google. So it's always it's the North Star, right? Like ensuring that if you're adding another channel, complementary channel, the back end is ticking over. Like you're generating more sales. So if you're now spending 25% additional budget on Google, then you're seeing somewhat of a similar increase on the back end in terms of revenue. So you're not now just adding more budget, because these ad platforms love to just kind of attribute themselves sales. So always making sure if you're adding an alternate channel or complementary channel, you're seeing an increase on the back end. So that would be first scenario. If they've got proof of concept either organically or with socials.
Yeah, I was just going to summarize that then. So first things first, further leveraging the existing data that you do have available. And I think rightly so, you mentioned just set up shopping and search maybe as a starting point, in that we'd always recommend starting at the bottom of the funnel and kind of working your way up. Because if you're unable to convert shopping campaigns or even search text campaigns using your existing data, then something's wrong. Like you don't want to start targeting the top of funnel, taking your creatives from Meta or TikTok or anywhere if you have been running them elsewhere, and implementing them on Google without first validating the bottom of the funnel and kind of working your way back up. So I think that's a good point. It's a starting point in that you should always start at the bottom, kind of work your way back up that sales funnel. You mentioned being problem aware and things like that. Although Google, you can utilize image and video-based creatives, there's so much you can do with search that you cannot do on Meta or you cannot do on TikTok, in that Google is an auction and it's search term based. So people are ultimately self-qualifying themselves based on what they're searching for. So you said about leveraging brand names and things like that. So if someone is a retailer and they're selling products for multiple different brands, and some of those brands have search demand, which you can find by looking at Google Keyword Planner, as we mentioned earlier, then you can start to leverage those brand terms and capitalize on that bottom of funnel traffic, because they're people that are already looking for the brand in which they want to purchase. So we'd always recommend starting at the bottom of the funnel, get your proof of concept, and then slowly work your way back up. So as a starting point, yes. And then when you're further along in your journey, or when you've got proof of concept, start setting up supplementary campaigns to further fuel your shopping and your search, like things Google Display Network or YouTube or even demand gen. So yeah, just wanted to summarize that for everyone. And then the other thing you touched on was obviously when you do introduce additional channels, just being aware of what you're spending and making sure that channels or different advertising channels aren't both claiming the same conversions, because Meta and Google Google, I feel like, is not as bad in that it's click-based,
Yep.
but a lot of Meta is obviously view-through conversions and things like that. So what would we suggest in that scenario? I mean, we wouldn't always suggest off the bat that you implement third-party tracking and attribution, just because some of those tools can be quite expensive, but you definitely want to make sure that your Google conversion tracking is set up correctly. And we normally use Symprocess for that, right? Especially if people are on Shopify and WooCommerce. And then when people start spending maybe, I'll say maybe like 5K in ad spend, do you reckon? Then we'd recommend introducing third-party tracking and attribution.
Yeah, I would definitely say I think there is a point in spend, and I think 5K probably is that lower end of it. I would say it's when you're making changes on an ad platform and it's not moving the back end, but they're just getting attributed more sales to that ad platform. So you're essentially like your contribution margin. If that is going up and it's getting, if your contribution margin is getting higher, meaning that you're spending more to acquire the same amount of sales, then it doesn't really make sense and you don't really know where you should put your budget best. So I think it's using the back end as your North Star always. Like, even if we're just working on the ad platforms, always using the back end, because I know what happens. You can go ahead and increase budget 25%, jump on a client call and say, oh, we've seen 25% additional in sales or 50% additional. And they would say, well, my back end's the same. So what has changed? It doesn't really make a difference to me.
Just to clarify, when you're saying back end, you just mean the actual sales channel, right? So whether it be Shopify or WooCommerce, because like you're saying, if you increase spend, but a lot of that spend is only going towards branded terms or traffic that ultimately has maybe been had an initial touch point from Meta or TikTok or another organic channel, paid or organic channel. Google may be the last touch point. So in the Google dashboard, that's going to show that we converted that, but then Meta, TikTok or other channels, maybe even email, whatever it may be, may also form part of that attribution journey and claim a conversion. So it's just about zooming out, like you said, looking at all of these channels, not just individually, but also measuring MER, your marketing efficiency ratio. So looking at spend across all channels and what that's actually resulted on the back end. Because if you increase your budget or introduce an additional channel like Google, and you're not monitoring what's actually coming out of the back end, like you say, on Shopify or WooCommerce or wherever your dashboard is, and rely solely on the figures inside of the advertising platform, it may not always be quite what it says.
You become out of alignment with the client, or you become out of alignment. Well, it depends, right? Because we're an agency, so I'm speaking about it in that perspective. But as a brand, you should really, really focus on, and most people tend to, because it's ultimately what goes in their pocket. But it's very, very important that, especially if you're media buying yourself for a brand, that you really do keep an eye on, like, what is my contribution margin? And what I mean by that is, how much am I spending on the front end on what channel? Okay, what am I generating on the back end? So back end, as in Shopify, WooCommerce, whatever it is, divided by the front end. Okay, that is what my blended return on ad spend now is. Then it's, right, we're going to increase budget, and what we would recommend 25% per week as an average. I'm going to increase it 25%. If by the following week you have seen a 25, 30, 40% increase within your ad account, but the back end is the exact same, then that just means it's over-attributing itself. Yeah, so you're not actually impacting your brand at all. So that's why we always keep a tab. To be honest with you, I'm looking at Shopify more than I'm looking at Google Ads conversion value, because I know that's the North Star. So I know when we're making changes, if, let's just say, we increase a certain product or a certain campaign by 25%, I don't know what I'm doing with my hand.
Your hand is going crazy.
If I'm increasing that by 25%, and then I'm seeing, okay, let's just say, for instance, there's multiple campaigns, we've increased them by 25% each, or whatever the value is. If I'm seeing certain things on the back end are increasing by that, but others aren't, and it's just being attributed more in the ad account, then I forget about that. I don't care about what's being attributed more in the ad account. I care what is actually moving the back end figures. So again, I know I've said that in a very long-winded way, but it's very important. It's something that, especially after auditing so many businesses and having discussions, the prospect will say, oh, but they're sending us these figures and it's saying that they've been attributed more sales. And I'm like, okay, well, what's happened on the back end? They're like, well, nothing. So it's like, okay, so what value are they actually bringing to your business? So they're just telling you their numbers on their screen are higher than your bank balance. It doesn't really make any sense to me. So I think that's extremely important.
For sure. Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that. So we've touched on a few things now. Where to start, what campaigns we'd recommend initially if you are new to Google and you own an e-commerce businesses.
Yes.
So shopping and search, leveraging your existing data, making sure conversion tracking is set up within Google Ads, or maybe even looking at third-party tracking and attribution if you are advertising or you've got traffic coming in from multiple different sources. Or if you don't want to do that, make sure you at least look at your MER and have a look at what's happening on the back end. So those, I think, are some really good kind of initial suggestions. Now, let's assume that let's look at the other scenario. Let's assume that someone has got to 10 to 20K with paid advertising, and a portion of that has been generated from Google. Let's just use it as a scenario as if someone approached us and they said, look, I want to work with you guys. What would we then do, and how would we identify opportunities for growth within that account?
Okay, it solely depends, especially if they're already advertising on Google. Let's just say they are in this scenario. Depends how many products they have. If they have a small neck of products, it's okay, understanding where is the value for this, and the best and first place to look is just the search terms, because if you have one product, it's likely just solely reliant upon that. So it's identifying what search terms have actually proven to work well, and then alternatively in that scenario, then also looking at what is wasting the most spend. So if let's just say for instance they want to scale and they're kind of sacrificing their ROI as they're beginning to scale, right? It's likely that what Google's trying to do, or whatever channel, but let's just say Google, is starting to look outwards, away from the things that are actually converting and trying to go after a broader market, because it can't facilitate that new amount of spend they're trying to scale with in that micro market they're working with. So let's just say, for instance, they're operating on the shopping network. It's then finding those converting search terms. Look, these are the converting search terms you have. This is what provides the most value. This is where you're wasting all of your spend. So if you immediately start by reducing where you're wasting all your spend, then you're going to have a higher ROI. And then that ultimately means you have more money to play with to scale first. Then second, a single product or a couple of products. Then it's grabbing those converting search terms and then plugging those within your product title, especially if you're on the shopping network, which then ultimately will mean that Google is going to try to laser focus its attention more to what has proven to convert, rather than going after a broader market as you begin to scale. So that's what I would say for a single product. Like if you're at 20K or below 20K, you still look at your search impression share first and foremost, because that will validate what I'm about to say. But if you're let's just say below like a 50% search impression share, you have a lot of room to grow. Like you can get to 30, 40, 50K, still with that particular product, the exact way that you've got it set up at a 40, 50% search impression share. So I'll just start there. Most people, the reason why they would come to you is because they're likely either wanting to increase revenue but they don't know how, or they want to increase revenue but every time they try to do it, it just moves that kind of efficiency ratio. It moves it in the opposite direction, meaning they're making less profit. So it doesn't make sense to scale. They're sacrificing profit for revenue. Yeah,
for sure. So initially it's normally search term based. That's where we find low hanging fruit initially.
Yeah.
For people typically in that scenario, like you say, like if they're unable to break past 10 to 20K on their own, and they're already using Google Ads, but they can't get past that point, then it's very likely that they just lack the knowledge or expertise.
Yes.
So
for a single product, I would say. Sorry.
Yeah. So even if they do have multiple products, you may still find that when you analyze the search terms, there's a lot of wasted spend on negative keywords, and where they're not leveraging negative keywords. So I guess that's one thing you're going to want us to do, is analyze the search terms.
Yes.
And also initially look at the leading metrics. You mentioned search impression share there, which ultimately determines how often your ad is being shown based on how likely it is, how often it could be shown. So normally a good way to get around search impression share is optimizing your search titles, like you mentioned, or your product titles rather, based on the search terms, so that you're more likely to show or get a better position then for search terms that people are looking for when the search term matches the search keywords that you're using in your product titles. Additionally to that, increasing your bids to get more visibility.
Yes.
Is there anything outside of search impression share that you'd look at as a leading metric when it comes to just a business in that position? Or would you go sort out your search impression share first, make sure there's no wasted spend on search terms? That's going to immediately get you in a better position. Are there any other leading metrics you'd look for? Obviously.
Yeah, well, what I would say is search impression share. If your search impression share is high, but you're thinking, okay, my search impression share is high, but I'm actually not getting that much traffic, it means that you're likely visible for the wrong things. And the way that you know that is with your CTR. If your CTR is low, let's just say sub 1%, and your search impression share is high, it just means you're bidding in the wrong market. Your price point maybe is out of whack compared to the market, which you'll be able to see by going into the auction insights, and you'll be able to see who are the brands you're competing with, or just searching for the highest impression search term that you have in your search term report. But really, the goal initially is, how can I get as much traffic, cost-effective traffic, and the highest conversion rate? Like, not all of those things, unfortunately, work together, but try to get your search impression share up whilst maintaining a steady 1% and above CTR, which will ultimately give you more traffic. Try not to use automated bidding too much in the beginning, because Google's going to bump you up there. And to be honest, if you don't have that many conversions, you wouldn't be able to anyway. But let's just say you get to the point in which you can, make sure, do a experiment, but make sure you're not now overspending. And a really good metric to look at for this is, if you switch to automated bidding and your CPCs skyrocket or go up by a fair amount, and your search impression share stays the same, it means you're literally now just spending 10 times more, however much more, multiples more, for the same volume of traffic. Okay, so that's same volume of impressions, less traffic. So I think that's very important. So search impression share monitors, and then you know how much of the market you have at your disposal. CTR to ensure that you're actually bidding on the right search terms and you're in the right market, relevant to your product, price point, whatever. And make sure that your bids aren't too high in which you can generate sales profitably, and you're not limiting or sacrificing profit at such a low revenue, because as you scale, it's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. The market is going to get more competitive, meaning they're likely to bid more, and they've probably tracked all of these other metrics, LTV, so they'll bid more on that front end because they don't care. They know the whole sales cycle. So I would say between 10 to 20K, I would start on just making sure that you're as visible as you possibly can. If you've got a single product, then really just analyze your search terms. If you have multiple products, analyze your search terms. But what we tend to find is, when people add a lot of products to Google, Google does its very best to test all of them and find where you have the most value within the ad account. But unfortunately, Google's not always the best at doing that. Sometimes you have to nudge it in the right direction. I'd say sometimes, most of the time. So what I would do is really diving deep into kind of Scripts, sorry to go on a rant, but Scripts, and be able to pull all of the data from outside the Google Ads account, because bear in mind, Google has built this platform in a specific way, so you focus on specific things, but sometimes those things don't matter as much as you think they do. So pulling the data outside using Scripts, pull it into Sheets, we have that type of thing available. Pull that type of stuff out so you can see all of your product data and segment them based on your return on ad spend, right? So then let's just say, for instance, you've got 100, 200, 300, 500 plus, 1,000 plus products. That's very hard for someone, especially if you're just you or even an agency, to analyze all of those. Like, you've got to think that takes a lot of time, and no one really spends all of that time doing that. So pull the data out, use a script to give it custom commands. Okay, I want to see all of my products over the last 30 days that have generated above a 5x ROAS, and I want to tier them incrementally. So things that are 25% to 500%, 50% below, and then above, right? And then what you can do, and what we tend to do initially, especially if there's loads of products, is analyze that. You've got thousands of products here. You've actually only got 7 or 8 or 10 products that are actually generating you above the target return on ad spend. If you just grab all of those and put them into their own campaign, put all of these other ones in a separate one and test them, then now you've increased your return on ad spend while still doing what you wanted to do, which is validate your other products. And now you have room to scale. So it's just really trying to narrow your focus below that kind of 50K mark. And then as you get to 50K and above, you can start to broaden it up and scale. But Google is an algorithm. It needs all of these data points to be able to operate in the right way. And if you keep feeding it loads of rubbish, it's going to keep giving that back to you.
I think that's a really important point. You expanded more on leading metrics, but also past that point, if you do have a big product library, you can only optimize so much of it yourself.
Yes.
Without just sitting in the ad account all day. And even then, it's just such a manual process.
Yeah.
So what you were talking about there is something that we leverage for our existing clients, which is Scripts, where we segment products based on performance. So
Correct.
whatever the client's leading KPIs may be. So let's run through an example then. Let's assume that someone's got 1,000 different products on their store, high SKU library. what you're suggesting they do is install a script.
Correct.
So where would they find a script and how would they install that?
To be honest, there's a lot of free scripts out there. So you could just type in script to optimize my return on ad spend, script to focus on revenue, ChatGPT. There's extensions to ChatGPT where you can kind of formulate scripts. Unfortunately, a lot of them are quite complex. So you would have to potentially find a paid one, or alternatively, we provide those, within the company. But that's where I'd start. I would just look at, okay, these are the processes that I'm doing at the moment, and these are the things that are moving the needle. Is there something that can automate this process? That's where I would always start, okay, when it comes to a script. Then it's, okay, what we always try to do is like conceptually think, because all a script is a series of tasks. That's all it's actually doing. So if you understand the series of tasks that lead to a positive result, then all you need to do is have a script formulated to be able to do all of those different processes.
Yeah. So you'd essentially find a script. What was the one that we would recommend using?
Flow Boost Labelizer.
Okay. So find a script similar to Flow Boost Labelizer or something similar, maybe a free version if you just want to kind of test it out.
Yes.
You're then going to install that, and you're going to allow this script to have access to all of the products that you have in your library.
Correct.
Then it will be dependent on how that individual script works.
Yes.
But you can set your KPIs. So like you said, you can ask it to identify all of the products that had a 5x ROAS over the last 30 days.
Yes.
You then take those products, or the script would take those products, right, and set them into what we'd call like a hero campaign of the top performing products.
Yes.
But I think the only thing you missed out is that this is all dynamic, right? Once
Correct.
you've set the KPIs for the script and it's operating in the way that you want it to, you can have multiple campaigns where bids are then adjusted based on performance. So high-performing products or hero products that are generating above a 5x ROAS, again, just using that as an example, but whatever your KPI may be, you can then bid more aggressively on those products on shopping. And then similarly, if products are underperforming, you can, let's say, below a 5x ROAS, you can bid less aggressively on those products to make sure that you bring the ROAS up. So something that we're leveraging at the moment for our clients is Scripts. That's one for the shopping network. Now, what we're talking about here is obviously manual shopping. Now, what if someone was using PMax? Because we see this a lot, right? People will either naively come in or potentially have an agency managing their account, and they set up a PMax campaign, and they're kind of sold on this thing of like, oh, PMax is great, it's going to get you in top of funnel traffic and target middle of funnel, cross channel, or not cross channel, but rather cross network, across all of Google's networks and things like that. But what people don't see is what's inside Google, and we have a separate script for that, right?
Correct.
It's a Mike Rhodes one.
Yes, correct, yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to talk through that and essentially what that does and why we use that?
Yeah, so I'm not going to act like I'm the smartest person in the world with this one, because this one's quite complex. But essentially what you're able to do is, obviously, like Theo said, PMax is operating on multiple networks, right? So what you're able to do, and what a lot of people say is when they install PMax, it's like, oh, we're going to give you the kind of full funnel here. We're going to give you demand gen, we're going to give you video-based, display-based, search is going to be in there, shopping's going to be in there. So a lot of agencies or brands get kind of sold this dream of like, I'm going to have a full funnel approach. But what we tend to see, especially if it's a lower spend in PMax, and even higher spending, but lower spend in PMax, and it's like, oh wow, PMax is generating me such a high return on ad spend. But every time I go to scale it, I'm unable to stabilize that return on ad spend. I'm actually just sacrificing my profit for more revenue. So what you're able to do with this script is you're able to pull the data out. Again, Google position it in a way in which they want you to see it, but it's not always the way that you should be. So pulls all of the data out into a Google sheet, and you're able to see each individual network. So you can see how much you're spending on display-based network, which is going to be YouTube, demand gen, display, how much you're spending on the search-based network, and how much you're spending on shopping. Okay, and especially if I can, test this. Look for the script and test it. If you're seeing a very high return on ad spend, it's likely that you're probably spending the majority of your budget on your brand name. So it's likely on the search network, shopping network, but mainly the search, focusing on your brand name. So you can see search term insights inside of PMax. So that will be, the first indicator that you're doing that. But yeah, always pull out the data from a PMax campaign. It's a black box, or it used to be a black box. Now we've got this available. Google leaves a lot of things open for people to look at. But unfortunately, sometimes the dashboard and their kind of incentive to do this is to make it so it's not as complex for the average business owner to operate, but it doesn't give you the information, especially if you want to dive deeper into it, of how to actually grow your business, especially without sacrificing return on ad spend or profit. So yeah, go get the micro script, PMax script. It's free. Pull the data out from your PMax campaign. Now you know what networks are working, and then build those outside of PMax, either as complementary and keep running PMax on the side, or just do it standalone and run it up yourself, because it's likely that you're wasting money on the other networks if they're not generating any sales.
Yeah, for sure. Unless, of course, you are running feed-only PMax,
Correct.
which is obviously slightly different, and then you can benefit from maybe acquiring more top-of-funnel traffic. But similar to how you would have a high-priority or a catch-all campaign anyway, if you are running feed-only, it's not massively different.
No.
But I guess it just automates it a little bit more in that you don't need to manage the search terms and things like that. So okay, we've covered quite a lot now, but let's go through that again. So we've got leading metrics, things to look out for, where we'd start ultimately if you hadn't spent any money yet on ads.
Yes.
What we would do if someone was generating sort of 10 to 20k already. So start with search terms, have a look for or identify any wasted spend, install scripts where necessary when it comes to scaling, especially if you have a high SKU library as opposed to doing it yourself. We also touched on conversion tracking and attribution, those kind of things. So let's assume now that someone's validated the bottom of the funnel. They've got their shopping campaign set up, they've got search set up, they likely obviously have remarketing set up. We didn't touch on that, but
yes.
Remarketing obviously also super important. You can go on to a Google Analytics report, have a look at your average customer conversion path. It will tell you likely how many touch points people have had before resulting in a conversion. Typically, it's often more than one, although Google Shopping sometimes can be an
yes.
average of one because they're people that are already bottom of funnel and have
Correct.
intent. But remarketing, obviously very, very important. Maybe let's scan over that one because I think most people should know the importance of that. But what would we tend to do? Google Display Network, either product feed remarketing,
yes.
dynamic product ads rather. DSA we sometimes set up, but remarketing only audience.
Yes.
To remarket to people on the search network that have already been on the website. If they have strong performing creatives on Meta and TikTok, you can often implement those as YouTube Shorts as well for remarketing.
Yes.
Am I missing anything at that point?
Demand gen, that's it.
Demand gen, yeah. So again, if you have image-based creatives, image and video, right?
Yeah, image and video.
Image and video-based creatives that are performing well elsewhere, you can put them in. I don't think we need to dive too much in that because you can kind of automate that stuff to a degree, especially if it's dynamic, right?
I think the only thing to look out for, as a little tip here, is make sure that you have your
optimized targeting.
Yeah, optimized targeting. So the best way to get out of that is to, in Google, go to your auto apply recommendations, and you'll be able to turn it off within there. So yeah, typically Google does its best to, again, to this point, it does its best to try to put everything in the hands of the business owner, but not too much. And sometimes when, let's just say, for instance, you want to do a remarketing campaign and your audience size is very small, Google wants you to be able to validate what is actually in that campaign, which is the creatives, right? The creative aspect of it. And sometimes your audience is so small that it never gets to test, and then it gives your perception, oh, this doesn't work. So Google then tries to use optimized targeting based on the data it has within the account, especially if you upload a customer list. It will try to use that data. All of a sudden you'll see, and a lot of people have this experience, all of a sudden you'll see 1 week you've spent X amount on display, you might have a little bit more traffic, and all of a sudden this display campaign, demand gen campaign, has all of a sudden picked up. And that's because if you go in the ad group targeting setting, you're going to see that optimized targeting is turned on, meaning it's essentially just going broad, it's going after a cold audience. Yeah,
and you definitely don't want that on remarketing.
No.
So yeah,
100%.
Keep an eye out for that, turn it off.
Yes.
Make sure it's off.
Yeah.
So that's remarketing. Like I said, I don't think we need to go into that in too much detail. Now, the strategy obviously is going to change quite a bit when you start getting to those higher advertising spends and greater revenue. So we've kind of talked through that sort of like initial phase of getting onto Google. If you're at that kind of 10 to 20k mark, what you should do and really implement that should be possible to kind of get to around 50.
Yes.
With bottom of funnel until you hit TAM, like your total addressable market, and you've leveraged all of the bottom of funnel search term data that you have available. You now need to start targeting slightly higher up the funnel, middle of funnel, or even maybe the top of funnel. So that's, I think, really where the game changes again, going from maybe that 50 to 100k and beyond. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%.
So when you're at that 50k point, you've leveraged shopping, you've leveraged search, you may be using some scripts to automate the process if you have a high SKU count and things like that. You've potentially got some other channels set up as well. Maybe you're doing some top of funnel on Meta, or maybe even TikTok. How do you now bring that over to Google and start targeting slightly higher up the funnel? Or maybe not necessarily bring that over from Google, but leverage Google alongside Meta and TikTok to, again, add more fuel to the fire?
I'd say this is the second phase of competitor research, because there is still a little bit of wiggle room here with Google. So what you've probably done is with Google, with shopping and search. So I'd still try to capitalize on that between that 50 to 200K mark, but there's other stuff we'll implement. So what I'd say first is you did the competitor research in the beginning. You understood what is the bottom of funnel stuff that I need to target, what are the highest converting terms. Now what you want to do is move up the funnel and go a little bit more broad, but you need to analyze your competition first to see, okay, within, let's just say, the home and garden space again, what is the average price point when someone's looking for just a chair, which is a super broad term, loads of search volume. Can I compete for that? Because that's going to be your opportunity to scale. There's millions of people looking for this a month, but your price point needs to be in check, your quality needs to be in check, your position, like all of these things need to be in check. So Google search and shopping, you can scale to crazy numbers with that, but you have to go to a broad market, and it depends if you've got a brand and you have high margins or whatever, but for you to be able to do that, you need to be competitive within the market. Okay, so I would say first, again, do some competitor research, determine if you have good positioning for some of these broader terms. Do the kind of, go back to the basics, go on Keyword Planner, go on Google Trends, see what is where the market is, what people are typically looking for in the market and has the highest volume. You want to try to capitalize on that because that's going to give you so much scope. But if you just wanted to fuel more what you had at the bottom of the funnel, being the terms that are already converting, but you've reached the addressable market, then let's just say, for instance, in this scenario, you are running on Meta. You would try to go ahead and take some of those creatives and move them over to Google, go cold on demand gen, and you can use search targeting on demand gen. So it's people that have been in the market looking for this particular, it's a custom segment, looking for this particular type of item or in this niche or in that audience group and in market audience group. Same thing with YouTube. If you've got video-based assets and it's maybe try your best to get it in like a mobile format so you can make the most of YouTube Shorts. I would say do that and then do the same thing in display. So you've managed to move yourself slightly or higher up the funnel. So you're now interruption-based rather than search-based, but you can utilize Google's search network to find people that are in this niche or have actively been looking within this niche, but not currently looking. That's what I'd probably say. Let's just say 50 to 200K that you're at that point. Yeah, and just to touch on the different types of targeting available there, like you mentioned, search-based targeting. You can also export your existing customer list from whatever platform you're using, whether it be Shopify or WooCommerce, and leverage that as well within Google Ads, either targeting those or finding users similar to your audience, assuming you've got more than 1,000 customers. And if you're already at 50K a month, you should have way more than that. Furthermore, you could also get your emails from rather than just your existing customer list, you can also leverage your subscriber lists as well. So that's another type of targeting. Search term you mentioned, also competitor-based targeting with URLs. So if you have, I'm going to try and stay on theme with home and garden. If you have a particular product and you're kind of neck and neck with another retailer or brand on the shopping network or on search, which you can see based on the auction insights inside of Google, you know it's a close competitor and you know you've got kind of maybe a similar price point or similar USPs, you could create a dedicated campaign around that product, especially if it was a top performer, and target your competitors' URLs on the display network, on demand gen, or on YouTube, depending on whether or not you've got image or video-based content, and speak on the USPs of your product versus your competitors. Now, again, you'd probably only do that if it really is a hero product and you've got proof of concept, but it is something as well you could test further up the funnel. Furthermore, if you've already validated creatives in Meta and TikTok, like you mentioned, you can bring them over into GDN, display and YouTube, and also scale those as well. If you've already done the legwork on Meta, which is an interruption-based platform, you can do a similar thing on Google. And again, just get more reach. I would suggest
Scaling on Google Display, YouTube, and demand gen is more difficult, in my opinion, than on Meta. I think Meta's targeting is much more advanced in the way that the pixel works now, and people are able to leverage broad. With Google targeting, because there are millions of websites on the display network, so many different types of audiences you can target, from customer lists, which is not a bad place to start, or lookalikes, but interest-based audiences. You'll have to list a few more for me. The broader ones that you kind of get.
Yes.
But more difficult to scale. So again, if you are going to do that, take what's proven to work on Meta or TikTok or any other channels, utilize it on the Google Display Network, demand gen, and YouTube, but just be very careful with your audience targeting. Try and start at the bottom of the funnel again and work your way up. And what I mean by bottom of funnel is they could be higher up the funnel, but leverage the data where possible. I think it's a common theme here that we've said, leverage your existing data. Don't go out to a cold interest-based audience on GDN and expect that to work. Even if it's proven creatives on Meta, it's just very unlikely to happen.
Yes, definitely.
So we've spoken then on scaling with creatives and leveraging what works on Meta and TikTok. Ideally taking what's already been validated and moving it over. Hi guys, it's Theo. I hope you've picked up some valuable insights to apply to your business. If you're still here, our analytics suggest you're in one of two categories. 1, you're a business owner looking for new insights to scale your operations. 2, you're an agency owner looking to deliver more and charge more for your clients. We've helped clients like you achieve incredible results like this, and this, and this in the last 12 months alone. When I'm not here in the podcast room, I'm delivering on my Google Ads agency with my business partner Joe, driving millions in profitable sales by improving Google Ads as a powerful sales channel for your business. I won't keep you for long, but if you've enjoyed our free content, then imagine how much value you'd get inside our closed community of exclusive content where we teach proven strategies to scale e-commerce businesses using step-by-step frameworks and weekly coaching calls in a community full of entrepreneurs. Check the link in the video description now for more info. All right, now back to the podcast. You also said there was a lot more that you can do on shopping and search. Did you want to add to that at all as to the actual strategies that we would kind of implement? Because I know there are some particular clients where we've got a lot of campaigns running, and we've got a lot of manual stuff going on with hero campaigns and things like that. Do you want to touch on maybe outside of, or in addition to your standard shopping campaigns and search, the additional campaigns you might set up alongside, again, to further fuel from that 50 more towards the 200K mark?
It really depends on how many products you have again, but let's do both scenarios, a couple of products, or 1 to a couple of hundred. Now, like I said, in regards to the scripts, at that point, you've now validated products initially. Let's just say you've just installed the script. You now see there's 10 products out of the 1,000 that are actually working. You now grab those, put those, because it segments it into a custom label. You grab the custom label that is the higher tier, and you grab the custom label that's the lower tier. So now you're scaling 10 products, but you still have 1,000 products that are kind of in this testing incubator. A lot of people actually won't even continue to test them. They'll just be like, those products haven't worked. Let me just scale the 10. Now you're limiting your scale revenue. So what we do is we have those products, 1,000 other products as this example, running in the background, high ROAS targets or low bids, and just really trying to fine tune exactly what has worked for those products. And then slowly but surely they'll start to kind of go up into the higher tier campaign. So we would segment by those. And then what we do is, because a lot of this stuff we're explaining right now is kind of automation, but the reason why we do that is because what you want to try to do is automate as much as you possibly can to find the thing that you can't automate, to focus your attention on that. Because you're eventually going to reach that point, and you may as well get there very quick, which means you can scale very quickly. Yeah. So what we used to find, and I'll take us back a little bit, it used to take us 3 months to be able to truly validate a brand, from start to getting to the point in which they would want to get to. Now, more recently, we've been able to do that in a much shorter time frame, right? There's even brands we've been able to do it in 30 days or less. So to get to that point, and it's very important, especially for an agency, to be able to validate as quickly as you can, because you're selling them on this kind of dream of them getting to this point. Obviously, ours is extremely logical. So we show them everything we're going to do. If they wanted to, they could take it away themselves and do it. But a smart business owner values their time over money. So obviously, we take that over. I've gone a very long-winded way of explaining this, but essentially what I would do is I would continue to test the other products, identify, okay, there's quite a lot of products here that are now moving into this campaign, or there's some that are kind of working, but they just don't have enough attention because Google's trying to focus on what works the most. So I'd continue to break down those products, especially if there's a lot, to really identify, is there any opportunity here? What, again, are the search terms? This is actually critical. When you have thousands of products, you get sick and tired of analyzing the search terms. And if you're bucketing all of your products into one campaign, you're going to struggle to find the search terms that work for particular products, because it doesn't segment by product. So what you might want to do is start to segment your campaign. We've kind of done it by margin at that point, or targets. You can then further do it by margin if you would want to. You can segment them by what drives the most revenue over the highest ROAS. But then what I'd start to do is identify, if you have loads of products, the categories that work best. Further break down those categories into individual products and just finding where all of the points of leverage are. So just break and break and break until a point in which you're unable to break it down anymore. So that's what I'll do on shopping, grab the what's working on shopping and put it over to search, split test different bidding strategies to make everything more cost effective. Your goal is to make everything as cost effective as humanly possible so you have the ability to scale. Because if you try to scale something and it gets so tight to your target return on ad spend or below that, you're just going to continuously struggle. You're going to keep sacrificing your profit.
I think it comes back to understanding your numbers as well, doesn't it? And understanding what your customer acquisition cost is, what your customer lifetime value is, and all of these kind of things that are often overlooked. A lot of people will just focus on front-end acquisition and just go, oh, I'm using PMax, I've got a 10x ROAS. Yeah, great. Yeah. But you're barely scaling. That's doing nothing. What are you trying to do? Maintain a 10x ROAS or actually scale this business, They 100%. Might be at a 3x break even. They're like, yeah, Google's great, I've got 10x. That's just ridiculous. It's not even you shouldn't even be looking at ROAS if it's 10x, need to scale the business. But it comes back to understanding your numbers, absolutely. And then you know where you have opportunity to scale, where needs tightening up and where is performing well. I think you spoke on segmenting products. Just to clarify, you can also segment products, not necessarily at, it doesn't have to be at a campaign level. You can do it within ad groups within a campaign, right?
Definitely.
So, just in case people don't know, you may have multiple different campaigns running, and within each campaign, separate ad groups, which, like you said, could be by product type, it could be by margin, it could be by performance. Anything that you need to do to better understand how your products are performing, try and segment them in ways that make the most sense, whether that be by category, by product price. Maybe you sell very high ticket products, maybe you sell very low ticket products. So you may want to segment high ticket and low ticket because you've got different KPIs and different margins. Your conversion rate for high ticket is likely to be lower than low ticket. So I guess when it comes to segmenting campaigns or ad groups by performance, it's really going to depend on the individual business. But what do we tend to do? Is it mostly product types or basically KPIs?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another thing. So we've touched on that, different campaign types, how to scale top of funnel using creatives, additional things that we would do with regards to shopping and search. You mentioned about pulling what's working from shopping into search. So again, just to clarify, you now have all of this data of these are all converting search terms that you can then take, leverage and set up search text campaigns. So then you're getting advertising on both networks, search and shopping. And there are things that you can do on there to leverage that. Because not everyone goes to that shopping tab, right? I know shopping ads are shown on the search network, but there's still a massive portion of traffic that only available on search. So if you find what works on shopping, take those converting search terms and build search text campaigns around those. You can then leverage what's already working on shopping on the search as well.
Typically a higher conversion rate as well because the cost per click is higher because there's limited placement. Shopping, there's tons of... The reason why your CPC is cheaper on shopping than search is because there is tons of visibility or placements available on shopping, meaning you're up against tons of people, competitors. But when you're on search, especially if you get to the top, that tends to have, well, it's more expensive normally, but has a much higher conversion rate. And I mean, a lot higher than you would see on the shopping network because your competition is limited. There's 3 competitors when it comes to the search network at the top and then more at the bottom. But when shopping, you're seeing at least 8-9 listings. Off just that first glance, there's 8-9 listings. So you're immediately also compared with price. Yeah, because the factors are your creative, your title, and your price point, and then any like promotions or USPs you have below the placement. But when it comes to search, they don't know your price yet. So especially if you're selling an item which might be more premium in the market in terms of price positioning, you might actually be better on search because they get sold into the vision of your item and your brand before they've even seen the price point. Okay, so I think search is really, really good for people that have a higher price point, first and foremost. And if you're more of a premium product in a market where the price point is a lot lower.
Where you need to educate people more
Yes.
to validate the price point. And I think as well, that's also a way that you can target the top of the funnel. Yes, the search network is expensive, but you can also be quite, I was going to say creative, smart in the way that you choose to leverage or target rather certain search terms, because if they're more question based,
Yes.
and you have a product that solves a problem,
Yes.
and you've also got dedicated landing pages that are proven to convert on shopping and even on your search text campaigns, but you now want to target the top of the funnel, that's where you can also build out things like advertorials or listicles, where you can educate them and sell them in almost like a blog format or an
Yes.
advertorial style, and then take them to the landing page. Because
100%.
if you are spending a lot of money on the search network and someone clicks and it takes them straight to a landing page, like you say, you need to validate that price point. If they see the price, they may just bounce immediately without even reading the information. So that's another way to target top of funnel, I guess. If you've got hero products, you can bring that product further up the funnel by educating people based on the problems that that particular product solves.
Yes.
Very good point. Another thing. So we've covered quite a lot now, and hopefully we've given people an insight as to as much as possible. Like there's so many variables when it comes to ecom and even Google ads as well. Like what works particularly for one client may not necessarily work for another, but I think we've done hopefully quite well in covering broadly like what strategies we would implement where and why.
Yes.
And without diving too much into the intricacies of each, hopefully just sparked ideas as to how people can potentially leverage certain networks at certain parts of their journey. We don't want them to just come in and set up like a cold GDN campaign with no existing data. So always start with shopping and search and then kind of work your way back up from the bottom. Now, if someone were looking to, that we typically see three different things. People are either trying to manage the Google ads themselves, but maybe just lack expertise or knowledge, or maybe even time sometimes, busy being a business owner. Then we also have people who have a good understanding, but really they're just looking to kind of outsource and they want someone else to manage it to really take their business to the next level. So what are some things you think people should look out for if they are trying to manage the Google advertising themselves? Where do you think they should best start, or not necessarily best start at a campaign level, but what is the most important thing that they should know, or where should they seek education?
Google Ads Academy.
Yeah, plug ourselves in there. Yeah. The number one Google Ads Academy, the Google Ads Ecom Academy.
Yeah, so I would say kind of like what we've discussed, right? And it's people should just first educate themselves. Try to find where provides the most value relevant to where they are at in their journey, right? So, if you're kind of below that 20K, to be honest, wherever, but if there's something that's limiting your ability to scale, it tends to just be knowledge. So knowledge and expertise. So if you have time available to do this, then just educate yourself further and invest in your education. But secondary to that, it's okay, you've got all of the knowledge that you believe you can possibly get. There's nothing else. Every video you watch is just validating what you have previously learned. At that point, then you need more dynamic knowledge. You need to understand, like, conceptually in this scenario, what would I do? Sometimes you can have like static knowledge that will tell you all of the underlying concepts, which you can then, experiment with yourself and understand how campaigns work or what strategy to put here. But then you get to a point where it's like, your scenario is a little bit unique. You've got certain targets that are unique. You've got a certain type of market that has a certain amount of demand, and you have different types of conversion rate in different places, and you just feel like, I'm not getting anywhere now. I'm putting in more time and I'm not getting any more money back. At that point, then I would advise to educate in having someone that's further down the line teach you dynamically what you would need to do in that particular scenario. So, get a consultant, something that we would do as well. But have the ability then to find all of the things that are stopping you, or what you believe to be stopping you getting to a point. And again, this isn't, when you get a consultant, you don't want a consultant to take over everything. You want them to be able to validate or invalidate, if that's the right word, the concepts that you're coming up with. So still continue to kind of have that chip on your shoulder, think properly about it, and know, okay, these are the concepts that I believe are going to get me to that next point. These are the things that I believe are stopping me. I don't know now what the best thing is to do. I'm going to speak to a consultant. They're going to validate or invalidate certain concepts that would work or wouldn't work. I want this target. Okay, these are the things that you would need to do. You go ahead and test it. So like a done with you service. And what that also actually does is, because one thing that I think we haven't touched on is this whole thing, this journey is it's an emotional journey, unfortunately. Even for the most logical person, it becomes slightly emotional, right? Especially if it's your brand. So you got to get into the mindset of, okay, it is actually a numbers game. This is logic. There's no emotion really at play. Emotion is not going to help you in this particular scenario. So logically, what makes the most sense here? This is what has got us to this point. These are the things that are actually now stopping us or inhibiting us from getting to the next point. I need a third eye's perspective.
Yeah, I think that's the most important point. Educate yourself as much as possible, but always be open to speaking to someone that has got expertise to validate the things that you're going to do, especially if you are trying to grow a brand, because it's a catch-22 at the start. You want to grow your business, but you maybe don't have much cash available. Most agencies want you to pay fixed retainers up front, and yet you still don't even know if that's actually going to get you to where you want to go. So really what you're going to want to do is educate yourself as much as possible if you are managing the ads yourself, or try to best understand what the person who is managing your ads is doing. If you do need external validation, seek some like consultant advice, or someone like us who can actually have a look at your advertising account and say, well, you know, there's a lot here that needs improving that would ultimately improve your return on investment, cut any wasted spend and things like that. And then once you do get it to the point where you've taken it as far as you can, and you no longer want to work with a consultant on a done with you basis, and you actually want to have more of a hands-off approach and have someone else actually come in and scale your business for you, that's when I would start to seek an agency. And to be fair, we've kind of covered all three of those. If people do want to educate themselves, they can join the Google Ads Ecom Academy, and they still get weekly Q&A coaching calls with us. So that's a perfect opportunity for someone in that position. They also have the opportunity to work with us on a one-to-one consultancy basis through that. And then if they do qualify for our agency service and they want us to scale their business and have more of a hands-off approach, then they can work with us that way. So hopefully people have been able to pull enough value from this video to scale their e-commerce business, or if they are even maybe a media buyer or a freelancer, have more insight as to how they should also scale an e-commerce business.
Yes.
Obviously, we can only cover so much when it comes to these top-level strategies, because not everything is directly relatable to each individual client. Like you said, there will come a time where you need bespoke advice to your business. Just setting up campaigns as per our advice isn't quite going to do it. But at least from this video, they should understand, I guess, the thought process behind it, maybe some things that they didn't realize they could leverage, like scripts and where to start and what campaigns to do initially. Hopefully, it should just give a good top-level view.
100%.
But yeah, really appreciate you coming on, Joe. I think you dropped a lot of game, so hopefully people found this really, really useful. And yeah, really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Likewise, no problem. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
bro.
Cool.